In April 1912, the largest moving object ever built by human hands set out on its first voyage. Newspapers called it unsinkable. 4 days later it was gone, along with more than 1,500 of the roughly 2,240 people aboard. But not everyone's odds that night were the same. This is the story of two of them, one traveling in luxury, one traveling in hope, and the one night that decided everything for both. This is Charlotte. She and her husband are boarding in first class, one of over 300 passengers paying for the finest accommodations afloat: a gymnasium, a heated pool, a dining saloon modeled on a palace. And this is Maeve. She's boarding the same ship, the same day, in third class. Like more than 700 others aboard, she's an emigrant, leaving Ireland for a new life in America. Her ticket cost a fraction of Charlotte's. Her cabin is a shared bunk room, several decks below. Same ship, same voyage, very different journeys, and that difference would matter more than either of them could have imagined. Between them stretch nearly 9 decks of steel, coal-fired boilers and cargo holds below, sweeping staircases and glass domes above. It's the largest man-made structure most people alive have ever seen move. For 4 days, the crossing feels almost like a floating town. In first class, the rhythm is genteel. Afternoon tea on the promenade, an orchestra in the evenings, multiple courses at every dinner. In third class, the rhythm is simpler, but no less lively. Communal meals, card games, and by several accounts, more music and dancing most nights than almost anywhere else on the ship. Meanwhile, in the ship's wireless room, operators Jack Phillips and Harold Bride are overwhelmed. Passengers are paying handsomely to send personal messages home, boasting about the maiden voyage. And that backlog means at least 6 ice warnings from other ships that day compete for attention with holiday greetings. Some warnings reach the bridge, others do not. Maintaining speed through ice fields at night is common practice for the era. Captains trust lookouts and clear skies over caution. The ship doesn't slow down. At 11:40 p.m., a lookout spots an iceberg dead ahead. The order comes too late to avoid it entirely. The ship scrapes along its starboard side, and below the waterline, several compartments begin taking on water. The ship was built with watertight compartments meant to keep it afloat, even with several flooded. But tonight, water is pouring over the tops of bulkheads, never designed to hold it back. In first class, near the top of the ship, the impact feels almost gentle. A shudder, then nothing. Charlotte barely registers it. Down in third class, closest to the point of impact, the jolt is sharper, and the sound of the ship itself groaning is impossible to ignore. Within the hour, the ship's designer, on board for the voyage, confirms what the crew has begun to suspect. The ship is going to sink, and there's no way to stop it. Word spreads to the officers, and stewards begin waking passengers. Charlotte's path to the lifeboats is short. A steward knocks on her door personally. A few decks, a few short corridors, and she's on the open boat deck within minutes. Coat handed to her, a seat waiting. Maeve's path is much longer. Third class sits deep in the ship, far from the boat deck. Through a maze of unfamiliar corridors, many passengers have never had reason to walk before. Many don't speak English as a first language, adding confusion to an already unfamiliar route. Some gates meant to separate classes, required at the time by immigration law, not built with this night in mind, are still being unlocked or found by crew as the ship fills with water. Some crew members go well out of their way, guiding groups of steerage passengers personally through the maze, deck by deck. Others, following standing orders or simply overwhelmed, are slower to act. The result is not a single villain, but dozens of small delays that add up to lost time no one can get back. It isn't a matter of malice so much as design. The ship was never built with an evacuation like this one in mind for passengers this far from the top. The Titanic carried lifeboats for barely half of everyone aboard, enough to meet the regulations of the day, which hadn't been updated in step with how large ships had become. Charlotte's lifeboat is lowered a little after midnight. Like many of the first boats launched that night, it leaves half empty. Crew members, uncertain how much strain the davits and boats can take, err on the side of caution, and few passengers nearby fully believe the ship is truly sinking. By the time Maeve reaches the boat deck, far fewer boats remain. Officers are now enforcing women and children first, a policy that night is applied far more consistently in first class than in third. On the port side, Second Officer Charles Lightoller allows only women and children into the boats, even when seats remain empty. On the starboard side, First Officer William Murdoch allows men aboard too, if no women or children are waiting nearby. Neither approach is uniform, and where passengers happen to stand decides as much as anything else that night. On deck, the ship's musicians keep playing, an act of composure that would become one of the most remembered details of the night. Maeve reaches one of the last boats to leave, with room to spare for only a fraction of those still aboard. At 2:20 a.m., less than 3 hours after the collision, the Titanic breaks apart and sinks. More than 1,500 people are still aboard or in the water when it goes down. Witnesses later describe the stern rising nearly vertical before the ship finally disappears. One of the most vivid and most disputed details survivors would spend decades trying to agree on. From two very different lifeboats, Charlotte and Maeve watch the same thing happen to the same ship from the same dark ocean, the first and only time their nights truly line up. Hours later, the steamship Carpathia arrives, having raced through the same icy waters after picking up the Titanic's distress call. Captain Arthur Rostron pushes his ship through the same ice field at full speed through the night, doubling lookouts and preparing hot drinks, blankets, and space for hundreds he doesn't yet know he'll find. Just over 700 people are pulled aboard, both Charlotte and Maeve among them. Of the 20 lifeboats launched, 18 are recovered that morning, each one carrying a story of who made it aboard and who didn't. Charlotte finds her husband waiting among the survivors. Maeve does not find most of the people she'd shared a table with just days before. When the numbers were finally counted, they told a stark story. About 97% of first-class women survived. Among third-class women, the figure was roughly half that. Overall, first-class passengers were about twice as likely to survive as those in third class. It wasn't that anyone on board wished third-class passengers harm. It was that every part of the ship's design, its regulations, and that night's chaos happened to favor the passengers already closest to the top. Investigations on both sides of the Atlantic followed. In the United States, Senator William Alden Smith opens a formal inquiry within days, questioning surviving officers and crew before some have even properly grieved. In Britain, a separate inquiry led by Lord Mersey follows soon after. Wireless operator Harold Bride, still recovering from frostbitten feet, testifies about the messages that came in, and the ones that didn't get through in time. They led to sweeping changes, formalized the following year in the first International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea. Enough lifeboats for everyone aboard. A permanent iceberg patrol in the North Atlantic still operating today, and a requirement that ships maintain constant wireless watch day and night. Together, they became the foundation of maritime safety rules still followed more than a century later. Charlotte and Maeve never met. They likely never knew each other's names. But for one night, on one ship, their very different lives were briefly governed by the same iceberg, the same clock, and the same unequal odds. The Titanic didn't sink because of one mistake. It sank because of many small ones stacked together, and it was rebuilt, in its way, every time a rule changed afterward so that the next ship's passengers, wherever their cabin was, would stand a better chance.